Well, we'll get rolling here. It's top of the hour, 10 o'clock Central. So again, I want to thank you all for hopping on. This is kind of a new, so we've been doing our Learning Lounges series within the Range Pod. And so each year we're trying to reinvent the wheel here and think of some different topics that might be of interest. And so we are really excited to kind of do this Beyond the Panel series. So again, this is going to be a two-part series. We're first going to go over Solar Site Management 101, which is kind of like our basic version. And then we have guest speaker Kelsey Singleton, who's going to be leading this one. And then we'll queue up here what our 201 will look like moving forward. So again, thank you all for hopping on. Few housekeeping items. So it looks like you all are familiar with the Q&A function. So I would ask that if you guys have questions throughout the presentation, to please put those questions in the Q&A function and not the chat. That allows us to go through and see those better and then answer them live. And so if you have questions, again, put those in the Q&A function. And then this is being recorded. So if you guys want to go back and if there's anything you missed or you would like to go back and rewatch, we will be recording this and sending this out on a later date. So with that, Kelsey, would you go to the next slide? Again, with that, my name is Katie Koenig. As you can see, this is the range pod we like to call ourselves. It would be territories 6, 5, and 4. And so I cover territory 6, which is Western Kansas, Western Nebraska, and Colorado. And then I'll turn it over to Jerome, you covering, filling in for Mike.
Yes, good morning, and thanks everyone for joining. Jerome Otto, and I'm filling in and covering the Territory 5 there you see, which is West River, Dakotas, Montana, and Wyoming.
Awesome. My name's Tanner Smith. I am in the process of leaving Region 7 there on the map and taking over Region 4. Worked with Corteva for several years now. Really excited to be more part of the Western rangeland that's a little bit more closer to home where I grew up, what I'm used to, and really excited to talk today about solar management because if you're calling in from the Zone 4 there on the map, there is a lot of solar projects that are new and planned for that area. So real excited to talk about that today with Kelsey.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. So again, you can see our contact information. So depending on where you guys are coming in from, hopefully you know who your local Corteva land management specialist or who that would be. But if you don't, you can see our contact information. If you're coming in from somewhere else outside of our territories, obviously feel free to reach out to us and we can point you in the right direction. But I really want to highlight our guest speaker today, Kelsey Singleton, and I know she is going to introduce herself. But Kelsey works for H2 Enterprises, which is an application out of Keensburg, Colorado, and they really work in the recreation and restoration business. And so she is the environmental manager for H2 Enterprises, and we're really happy to have her on. I love working with them. And so when we were talking, I said, you know what, you'd be the perfect person to do our introduction because they have really dived into the solar space and have really led the charge as far as understanding, you know, what it takes long term to maintain a solar site. And so, Kelsey, I will turn it over to you. And thanks again. We appreciate you hopping on.
Yes, no, thank you guys. Katie, we talked a little offline, but I'm just super, excited to be here today and kind of share some experiences that we had. But two, I think it's really great that Corteva is taking the initiative to provide different learning lounges like this. I think it's super important for not only like from the applicator space, but from the industry standpoint as well. So with that, as Katie said, I'm Kelsey Singleton. I work with a company by the name of H2 Enterprises, who is powered by Hua Enterprises. And I wanted to start today just by playing a video of the company of where I come from. I feel like it'll give you guys a better understanding of kind of the things and key points that I'm going to talk about today and how we've learned about all of the solar industries and the different phases in which vegetation management are critical. So with that, I will play this little video.
Growing up on a family farm taught us the importance of respecting and caring for the land. Over 20 years ago, we formed the first of its kind company that specializes in land reclamation. Our innovative approach, leveraging science and technology, balanced with environmentally sound practices, quickly established HUA as reclamation leaders. Today, HUA is led by 4 brothers who have surrounded themselves with a diverse workforce, balancing land and soil experts with experienced field team members for results well above industry standards. Our other business divisions still include farming and ranching, so we can stay current with the latest technology, best practices at solving problems everyone is facing with land. We delineated the company into 4 areas of expertise: land reclamation, civil construction, traditional energy and renewables, and emerging energy and renewables like solar and tech science. RecTech Science, Agrimation, and Solterra Land Assessment Survey are just a few examples of our leading initiatives. Every job and project are previewed and studied to ensure our approach is the safest, most efficient, and most successful at the best price. Only this personal approach can produce all these results every time. Our Goal Zero safety measures speak for themselves. Our team members are given full authority on every job site to ensure a safe and risk-free work environment. Our parents instilled in us a desire to always give back to the communities and the companies that support us. The Summit is one example. It has become one of the largest field forums on land restoration in the country. Rope and Rascals is another great example, as we provide special kids the opportunity to be a cowboy for a day. Both events connect us with our community, clients, and suppliers, who all contribute their time, effort, and resources. We have the experience, insights, and instincts to be the nation's most successful reclaimers of land. Our employees are engaged and focused on exceeding our clients' expectations while we solve their problems and challenges. Safe, humble, driven, and accountable, HUA Enterprises would be honored to work with you.
Sorry. So just a little bit about, I feel like the importance of that video just kind of gives an understanding of the years of experience that we have, as well as the different verticals we have within the company. As you saw, we have 4 different verticals, and one of them happens to be, the renewable and energy sector. We've spent a lot of time over the past 8 to 10 years within this sector and have learned a lot. And I think today, one of the biggest things I want to do is just bring some light to the different areas that are within the solar industry, and then some of the lessons learned, as well as how important it is to understand the vegetation management through all phases of these solar projects. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I have a burning passion for bridging the gap between the construction world and then the sustainable environmental world. So that's kind of what I'm here to do today, and hopefully bring you light and understanding to the solar industry. So with that, one of the first things I wanted to talk about, I feel like the solar industry is very diverse in understanding the phases of these projects. From our perspective, there are 3 major phases of these projects. Obviously, as you can see on the screen, there's the pre-construction phase, engineering, procurement, and construction, which is most commonly talked about as the EPC. And then there's operation and maintenance. Something I wanted to point out about each of these phases is the length in which they last. So pre-construction, this phase in particular can last anywhere from 1 to 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 years. There's a lot of different things in terms of acquiring the land, getting some of that permitting, and like those initial planning phases going. A lot of these projects are planned, maybe in year 1 of this pre-construction, but aren't actually started or slated to start construction until like year 5 of this process. So there's a lot of runway, if you will. And then obviously the engineering, the EPC phase is the construction. And then that's, I would say on average about a year, rule of thumb. And then operation and maintenance is probably something that everybody on this call is most in tune with and probably has a piece of that puzzle. And this is something that lasts, depending on project and location of project, 10, 15, up to 30 years. So just really wanted to bring an understanding to the 3 phases, as well as highlight how important it is that each of these 3 phases have synergies between them. We see a lot in the renewable world how, pre-construction is siloed from EPC as well as siloed from O&M. And so we're just trying to bring light and understanding into the importance of, helping the energy world see big picture. At the end of the day, the energy consumers are wanting to decrease cost and maximize their production. So how do we help them recognize what one of the most important factors of decreasing costs is? Vegetation maintenance. So we get involved early on within the planning stage. And then this slide specifically, I wanted to point out, it's so important, like when we're talking about those 3 phases of solar projects, that we understand, again, big picture and how each phase affects one another. So like I was talking about in this planning phase, this phase could be 5 years, but we have to think about the end goal, which is like that monitoring and what we want that land use to be, years prior to when it's actually going to be in production. So just bringing light to understanding that each phase has, its own way in the construction world. And they right now, and I guess this isn't everybody, but from some experiences we've had, we really see a silo in phase 1, and then in phase 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, and 5 is kind of siloed, and then we really see this one siloed out. So really today, just trying to bring an understanding of how we make those more continual. And with that, I'll start. So the pre-construction phase I was talking about is kind of, that 5-year span. This phase in the renewable sector has a lot of people that touches it. There's a bunch of people from, the geotechs to veg to SWIP to installation and permitting. There's numerous hundreds of people that have their hands on this part of the project, which means the planning is all that much more important. So what is that final goal, and what do we want that land use to be? That's also where the site evaluation comes in. What is for this project? Every project is different, but what for this specific project we're looking at, what are the details that are going to help get that site revegetated and meet that ultimate goal, which is ultimately permit closeout for construction and then into O&M. And then the EPC sector of this is, there's 3 super important parts that we want to consider. We really want to help educate our partners on grading and leveling. We only want to grade where necessary. A lot of these sites are, either starting to be in agricultural land or in rangeland. And when we already have, for rangeland, good native establishment, we don't want to grade sites and disturb that vegetation, where, especially in, I live in Colorado, arid climates where it's hard to revegetate. So offering expertise on, when to grade, where to grade, and kind of how to grade and what that looks like and how it plays a factor in getting the vegetation to come back. And then again, grass establishment, are we considering when we're planting, what type we're planting, also helping them understand the different cost variations that there are to grass establishment. So if they're considering it in the pre-construction phase, there's a lot less cost associated versus when they're considering it in the construction or post-construction phase, just because of the piles and all the material that is in the way. And then at the actual construction is, are we continuing to maintain that vegetation throughout the entire process? So are we meeting SWIP requirements? Are we mitigating the erosion? And what does that look like? Are we broadcasting? Are we, drill seeding, that kind of stuff? So just really helping them understand that if we can get grass establishment or vegetation establishment during construction, we're likely to be able to get to the O&M phase and closure much, much quicker. And then, something I forgot to mention here. So the construction process in general is, like, their ultimate goal here, like I was talking about, is the SWIP closure. So in an ideal world, the EPCs would love to get their SWIP closed out prior to, the construction phase technically being over. So that would be the ultimate goal. And that goes back to these 3 levels of understanding, grading, establishment, and like what that site and region are. But what I really wanted to talk about is how many people from the energy aspect touch this project. There's all the laborers, operators. I don't even know how many that could possibly be for a utility scale size project. But on the vegetation side, there's a number of people that are trying to help implement an integrated weed management plan that is established during the pre-construction. There's people that pertain to the SWIP and then the erosion issues that happen during that. So my point here is there's a lot of people that have their hands on each phase of these projects and then within the phases too. And then the operation and maintenance phase is obviously, the re-veg and the monitoring. And we just have to have an understanding of how we continue to revegetate that site and then what best management practices look like for these. So is it grazing, mowing, herbicide application, just having an understanding of what that plan was in the pre-construction phase and how it's implemented all the way through, those 25 years that we talked about. And now, so I really want to talk about a bunch of the influences that we see that affect vegetation maintenance come from basically 3 main categories. The construction phase, obviously there's a lot of, like I was talking about, grading and heavy equipment and that kind of stuff that goes on. So how that affects vegetation, and then really understanding that maintenance strategy and how we can help bridge the gap between pre-construction, construction, and into O&M with basically a plan. And then what the budget is definitely a big hindrance in terms of how much is allocated for the O&M phase for vegetation maintenance. So I'll start with the construction. One of the best ways that we've found within the industry to help alleviate post-construction vegetation hazards, I guess we could call them, is by creating integrated veg management plans from the beginning. So getting involved in those early stages and help educating the project teams and helping them recognize that the synergies gained from going through the entire construction process with vegetation in mind is substantial. And also helping educate them on that it's not just you throw the grass seed out there and it grows overnight. There's a number of factors that go into that, herbicide application being one of the largest factors, as well as just mowing, just the mitigation plan in general. So really helping them stay on track with this vegetation management plan is an integral part of the construction process. Then there's like the site conditions. One of the reasons we like to be so involved in this is because there's a lot of people that don't have vegetation in mind. So they'll go and they'll just, they'll disturb hundreds of acres of soil and not think about erosion or the salvaging of the topsoil and just how that affects everything from there on after. Compaction's a little bit harder. Ideally, from my seat in the stands, we don't want soil compaction, but there's certain limitations that have to be met for these solar farms to be sustainable. So that one's, I guess I lightly mentioned compaction. And then just understanding that we're executing at the right time during construction. So, if there's precipitation in the area, maybe let's try not to, work in areas that are unvegetated or work in areas that have more mature vegetation because they can withstand, more impact. So just really helping them understand when, where, and how to do the construction process, keeping vegetation in mind while still obtaining their production goals. And then the maintenance strategy, I feel like this is one that we can spend lots and lots of time on. That integrated weed management plan that I talked about is hands down one of the most integral pieces that we've found as a contractor and applicator to help, I guess, hold their feet to the fire, and one of the ways we're able to do this is by understanding the different site conditions and what I guess the ultimate SWIP goal is for that site. And then also understanding the site design. Can we create a plan with the site design in mind? What are the panel heights? What is the spacing, the road layout, the drainage? What each of those, what those pieces of equipment look like, what the application techniques look like, and have that all laid out so they can think about these things. And then hitting ecological and regulatory requirements. This is a huge one in the solar industry. I'm sure everybody hears about pollinators and all of the different things. And we have to have this integrated into our plan because their ultimate goal is habitat creation and then having a diverse ecosystem within their sites. So we just have to make sure that they're maintaining this strategy as well as meeting these requirements in order to, get their SWIP closure at the end of the construction process. And then region, as I'm preaching to the choir, everybody knows is so important. You can't just mow once in Louisiana, and you quite typically don't mow 4 times up in, the Montana region. And same goes for herbicide application. So just helping them follow the guidelines of understanding where they are in the country, and then how we get those implemented. And then, as we're also aware, helping people understand the varieties in which that they're planting. So, a lot of people want to plant pollinators from the beginning, and although it looks great and meets all of their regulatory and ecological requirements, it's really hard when you're trying to get desirable grasses established on a site, and you're still having to mow or apply herbicide. The broadleaves really get in the way there. So just helping them understand when and where and how to apply those different seed mixes and still meet their requirements is a super big part of all of this, and it has a super big influencing factor on ultimately, at the end of the day, what contractor these energy companies choose to go with. Because a lot of what we experience, there are some energy companies that, more on the pre-construction side, that really take an understanding and commitment to helping people know about vegetation and what it requires to have, a sustainable ecosystem on their site. But then there's a lot of, we get into the construction phase and we're wanting to, build that project, reduce costs, and maximize our energy production. So we forget about the strategy. And so that's big. One of our biggest hindrances is just them not, being educated on what's going on. So we really pride ourselves in helping them understand these 4 different verticals here. And then I feel like this is probably the largest one of them all, budget. So from the very beginning, in the pre-construction phase, budget influences the vegetation management. A lot of what we see and why we like to be so involved from the beginning with those integrated weed management plans that I was talking about is because that's when they set budgets for their O&M phases. If they aren't considering the region and the seed variety and where they're placing pollinators and so on and so forth, they're a lot of times not allocating the proper budget for that site specifically. So just providing an education and understanding of, what that really looks like for each project specifically. And I talked a lot about this earlier, or a little bit about it earlier, is one of their biggest goals is to decrease cost. And vegetation maintenance is seen as a cost, but one of the greatest ways to decrease costs is have that plan and have somebody that's, local and an understanding of these certain regions. And then also, what we like to integrate into all of our plans, herbicide application. It is significantly cheaper than most mowing operations. So just basically being able to provide that value so they can allocate an appropriate budget is kind of where we come into play in that pre-construction phase. And then the budget is highly driven on the site design. There's a number of different systems and layouts and all of these things for every region across the United States. So that has a big factor in the vegetation budget as well. And then these contracts are long term. I talked about 10 to 30 years, depending on the project. And that is a significant piece of this project, therefore a very significant cost to this project. So just want to reiterate the fact if we can provide solutions and helping them understand the importance of allocating that budget properly from the beginning, we're likely to have a better outcome in the O&M phase of these projects and really get that site looking picture perfect, if you will, for for the surrounding community. And I actually wasn't going to talk about this, but something just popped to my mind. How the energy or any industry really works in general is basically public perception. There's a lot of bad rap around solar or oil and gas, for that matter, whatever industry. There's a lot of negative connotation. But one of the fastest ways to win somebody over is for that site to look good. And usually vegetation and pretty flowers and different things like that are how people perceive, the whole solar industry in general. So we really pride ourselves on the fact that, public perception is 90% of the overall budget. And we just really want to focus on helping, the industry, I guess, understand that public perception is one, it's super important, and two, that's how they're going to make or get their next project. So this, yes.
Yeah, real quick on that last slide. I mean, you're bringing up some great points on, the public perception. Would you say that a lot of these companies, energy companies they obviously see the vegetation maintenance as a cost, but do you think that they value that, or is that kind of still like, well, it is what it is, not prioritizing it a lot, or do you think most of these companies understand the value of it?
I feel like we're at a maturity in the industry that they are recognizing the value in this, just because, again, if there is a negative connotation, it makes it a lot harder for landowners to sign over land or what have you for the next project. So if they're taking pride in understanding, these people own their land for years on end, and they're wanting it to look just as good in a solar farm as it did prior to that, and that's how they get their next project. They really are taking pride in trying to educate themselves and then their teams internally on the importance of understanding, the vegetation process in general. And I do think, I guess, Katie, you might kill me for saying this, I'm not sure, but the herbicide, I feel like in general is sometimes has a negative connotation around that world as well, much like the solar industry. People, think solar and they're like, no, I don't want that on my land. I don't want to look at it, what have you. But herbicides in general, we've been doing a lot of education with the help of Katie, and then, all of the local applicators play such an important part in helping people understand, veg management and how we can lower those costs through herbicide application. So just advocating for yourself and for, the chemicals, I guess, is such a huge part of it. Just simple education and helping them understand. It's not necessarily hurting the land, it's just making it better, and we're achieving success at a much quicker rate, if that makes sense.
Yes, nope, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and I think that's where, as Corteva, we try to be a part of this process with our applicators, is to help with that, bridge the gap there of, what herbicides can do. But I mean, there's obviously instances where, maybe another option or method needs to be done. And so I think that's where, and correct me if I'm wrong, but being involved from the beginning on these projects probably helps quite a bit.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's where today's all of these points I've made today come from the unique perspective that we have been able to be involved from the beginning. And I know just from attending the applicator training in January that there's a lot of, I guess, misunderstanding on how these three phases work. and how people in local environments get involved with these solar farms or what have you. And I guess I just want to encourage everybody, and I talked about it a lot there, that, providing your expertise in the field that you thrive in is super integral, and I can't stress that enough. If you provide value and expertise to these people, they're, open arms to having somebody that's local and have an understanding of where their project actually is. And, they also have a consideration for people that have to look at the project and they want it to look their best. So being able to provide that experience and have that open mind is where we've found a lot of success in getting vegetation maintenance contracts, as well as being involved in all phases of the project. And I have a couple pictures. I'm gonna try to wrap it up because I'm sure there's some questions that are floating around, but just wanted to reiterate the fact that the construction and reclamation phase are essentially very short parts of the overall project. It's in that vegetation maintenance, that O&M phase of the project, where the longevity lies, and where there's a lot of cost accrued, and where we can provide a benefit to these companies. So just helping them, whether it's helping them understand when and where to plant pollinators or apply the herbicide to minimize their fire risk or minimize their mowing. They're always looking for different avenues and different ways to be innovative on these sites. We just have to be willing and open-minded to help them recognize that. And then one of the last things I wanted to talk about today, there's numerous ways that these projects are slated, and there's numerous ways that these projects can be revegetated and all of the things. But I feel like this is one of those deals, like if we have an understanding from start to finish, we can help ourselves on the backside of what we really want to focus on, which is that O&M veg maintenance piece of it. So just helping everybody understand that, from the very, very beginning, from planning all the way through, the last pile being drove into the ground, has an integral factor on the outcome of vegetation maintenance. And if we can help, alleviate bridge the gap for these energy companies to understand the longevity and sustainability of these sites, is so important. And I can't stress it enough that just having an understanding of each of these steps, or however it looks in your region, is going to, move mountains for that certain project. So, I guess the last thing, I forgot about this one. That last thing I wanted to talk about, I talked a lot about the different phases and what vegetation management looks like, and then the different influencing factors that each of those stages have on vegetation maintenance. But solar outlook, from our seat in the stands, and please don't quote me on this, but we have a lot of, strategic partners within the industry, and the solar industry, as Tanner was talking about in his region, is only going to continue to grow. I know there's a number of factors that are going to, maybe prolong this and or expedite it, but from our seat in the stands, from what we've heard, there's only going to be growth within the solar industry. And I just want to reiterate the fact and hone in on all the more reason why we need to be considering, educating ourselves on these different phases of the project, so we can help be the subject matter expert, if you will, on the area we're so common and hold dear to our heart, which is that O&M vegetation management phase. So with that, hopefully I didn't confuse anybody anymore. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I've spent a lot of time within the industry, and we have, you guys might have seen in the video, we have some different programs that we're running here at our office to be able to help, these companies recognize, help these companies meet the national standards that they want to meet, but at a local level. And so there's some words that were in the video, aggramation, a program that we have here, and that's, we're implementing that to do just that, meet those national standards at a local level. So if you guys have any questions from today and or about that, my email's on the screen. please feel free to let me know what they are.
Yeah, so we do have some questions, or I know I have some questions. Every time we talk, I feel like the more and more things come up, but I think you do a great job of depicting, what is the process. I just think and just not wanting to just keep beating a dead horse here, but the O&M phase always seems to me to be the one that's most overlooked because there's so many hands touching a complete development of a solar site, right? Like, I mean, if you're thinking off the top of your head, how many different hands and companies are touching a solar site before it actually gets to the end production? On average, how many would you say?
Oh gosh. So I talked a little bit about like pre-con, and that was, I don't know, several hundred people. And then construction, I would say thousands. And then operation and maintenance, that's, initially there's a lot more people just to get it kicked off. But then over the years, you're probably looking at about 10 to 15 people just constantly on that project, maintaining it from several different aspects, mechanical and or vegetation. But then in terms of contractors, I don't even have a guess. There's so many companies that touch these projects from start to finish. It's absolutely crazy. And all the more reason why we've, spent the last 8 years trying to be that common denominator through all 3 of these phases, because we recognize the importance of, the one person having the knowledge from start to finish, as well as advocating for, the vegetation mitigation and management of these sites.
Of any, I mean, you mentioned you guys obviously host your own rec summit, but are there other educational resources or conferences that if I, was in Missouri and wanted to go, learn more, I see there's a solar development going in down the road, like how can I be more involved or get involved or get in touch? Like where do you even start if you're an applicator and you don't know what's going on or you want to get involved?
Oh, that is a great question, but two, a very loaded question. I did not prepare like a list of conferences, but there are several conferences. I'm not sure specific to Missouri. I would have to do some homework on my end, but there are so many conferences that are out there that provide so much value. And I'll like I said, I'll do some homework and I'll create a list of some of the best conferences that I've attended over the past few years, and maybe that would be helpful for whomever's asking. But also, yeah, like we host our own reclamation summit here. So if you guys are interested, grab my email off of the screen here, and I can try to give you some more information on that. And it's a great platform to come and learn, as well as see what's going on in different industries.
Another one is, we talk about an integrated vegetation management plan, and hopefully with regardless of solar, pipeline, really regardless of where you're applying or where you're managing the land, hopefully someone is implementing a plan with an end goal. But what are some of like the key components that you would say, like these are must-haves of building a good IVM management plan?
I think that the biggest thing, and I stress the local aspect for the solar industry specifically, is having an understanding of the land. I would say that's first and foremost one of the top points that has to be stressed throughout the plan is just, do you know where you're at in the country and what soil types and vegetation grows well there? That's something that we try to educate and put in that plan. And then the second thing is the application techniques, and then how many of those per year, and cost benefit to each of those techniques. So whether that be herbicide or mowing, a lot of people don't have an understanding of, like I was mentioning earlier, there's several people that think you can mow or spray once in Louisiana and you're good for the year, but turns out that's not usually the case. So having an understanding of your region is probably the first and foremost point, and then just having the application techniques and timing is the second.
One thing I don't think you might have slightly touched on it, but I know when I do a lot of industry meetings or talks through solar, a lot of the questions that come up are more around the animals, grazing practices. I mean, where are you seeing that? I know you guys have done a lot of work with that, but I mean, is that something you think that's going to be longevity, or do you think that they're kind of realizing that might not be the best option?
I'm glad I'm on the computer so nobody can throw anything at me. But quite frankly, my opinion is it's not going away. We're getting into, some very unique landowners, and we're not running out of land, but they're being selective about the land that they are choosing. And there's a lot of states that are regulating that if there's not agriculture in mind as well as energy in mind, there's absolutely no shot for any sort of energy production to come off of that land. So for that reason, I full-heartedly believe that like grazing is not going to go away. As you did say, there's a lot of grazing that's happening, in those regions where vegetation is more easily established, not so much here in Colorado. But a lot of what we see is sheep grazing. However, we are internally working on integrating some different grazing techniques as well as agricultural techniques such as haying. So yeah, I'm super excited about that aspect of it. It is something though that there definitely is I don't know, I'm sure most of you have heard the word agrivoltaics. And that's, planting row crops and stuff on these projects. However, at the utility scale, it's just not feasible when, pen goes to paper in terms of cost and how much it takes to, manage those row crops. And then the equipment just wasn't set up from the beginning for those row crops. So yes, I long story short, no, the grazing component is not going to go away, nor is the haying component. I think it's just going to get more heavily integrated into these solar sites. And all the more reason why a vegetation management plan is so important.
Yes. Well, if anyone has any other questions, please put them in the Q&A. We still have a little bit of time, so again, if you have questions, feel free to throw those in. Otherwise, Kelsey, would you mind hitting the next slide, please? Oh, there we go. Okay, so if you guys are interested in learning more, this was kind of our teaser. Oh, did it go to the next one?
Sorry.
There we go. This 101 was kind of our teaser, really just going over the basics again. The O&M, what are this life cycle of a solar site development. But what we're going to talk about next up on April 29th is the 201 version, which is what are the methods, what are some of the applications that you can be doing. So I know we've talked, if you guys have hopped on some of our previous learning lounges, we've talked, maybe just on total vegetation control, and, or maybe we've just talked on perennial growth regulator treatments, but how we can tie a lot of those application methods into a solar site maintenance. So, like Kelsey said, there's no one size fits all when it comes to these, because I know if you talk to our Western folks, in California or Nevada, they're going to be primarily doing no vegetation for maybe some, fire risk, fire potential, things like that. But as you move into a region, maybe more central, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, there's going to be vegetation there, so you're going to want to manage that differently. And so that's kind of what we're going to jump into in our 201. So we'd love to have you guys all on there as well. So we'll dig more into that there. Another registration link will come out for that one as well. But that's really going to be more into what are your options today that you can be managing or building a vegetation management plan. So we definitely want to make sure you guys get a calendar hold for that. And again, we'll be sending out a registration link for that. So with that, again, if you guys have any questions or any input, please throw that in the Q&A. Otherwise, again, thank you all for hopping on. And we hope to see you guys on the next one.